I'm Dr. Pete Economou, the East Coast psychologist.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
And this is When East
Meets West.
Hey, Nikki, I got a secret for you.
Oh, tell me.
No, I don't want to because I'm private.
It's a good. Everyone listening is like, I don't understand this setup at all.
Well, let's
we were talking right before we turned the recording on, so
let's
it's a good joke for us.
Let's break down secrecy versus privacy.
Okay, let's do it because I think this is a very, very these are very commonly misconstrued concepts and practices.
Yeah, well, one of the things I want to start with is that, sometimes like in the world of sports, we'll talk about ways that you can build trust, like with a team.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And obviously, secrets can rupture trust or,
Yes.
right. And so there's this idea of like acts of commission or omission that we talk about, with some athletes, because, you could sort of forgive someone who omits, so omitting meaning like I just forget to tell you, 30 or 40% of something, but I omit the remainder. But committing a lie or kind of holding a secret or sharing, sharing secrets, that really can have a big damage on people. Yeah.
Well, sure. And I think this is where maybe it would be helpful to kind of, I know you love to get in on some definitions here, Pete. Define secrets or define what secrecy is, or talk about sort of like the function of secrecy, because it's very qualitatively different than privacy or being private. And I will set this up by saying secrecy is not effective and privacy is.
Oh, I like
for
that.
For the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part. Again,
nothing's absolute.
Nothing's absolute, just FYI, but I can talk about that too.
Well, I want you to talk about the functionality, but I'll give this the Oxford definition. So secrecy is the action of keeping something secret or the state of being kept secret.
It's not a helpful definition.
Don't they know not to use the word that you're defining in the word?
Well, apparently not, because that's an extremely unhelpful definition.
How would you define it?
So I would say a secret is something that we're withholding.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to what you were just saying in terms of why it can like rupture or like erode trust, because it's about withholding something. And sometimes there's like shame associated with secrets, or maybe it could also be fear, right? Like you're afraid of being like harmed or hurt in some way. I mean, I will just say, like, this is where like nothing's 100%. Sometimes keeping a secret is protective, right? Like if somebody, for example, is like leaving an abusive relationship, right? And they're planning to leave, they're going to need to keep something secret. So the function there would be safety and protective. Though I would say that most secrets don't fall into that category. Most secrets have the quality of like either somebody feels like what they're holding is something shameful, they believe it's shameful, or there's guilt around it. Or
well, hold on a second. We hold secrets all the time, just based on our work.
I wouldn't call them secrets. I would call it privacy.
It's
in fact, even legally and ethically, it's privacy. Yeah.
All right. Wait. Yeah. So then I'm having the hard time differentiating as well. I mean, I'm not. I see the function of the difference, but I guess by definition or by act, they're very similar. Yeah.
Well, so I'm gonna explain my view on privacy in a moment too, but I think maybe it's worth saying that, and again, I talk about this in session all the time, is like sometimes the behavior can look the same on the outside, but what's behind it is different, and that's the function, right? So like a very silly or simple example, which I've probably said on this podcast, is like, think about the behavior of sleep. Like if you go to sleep at 11 o'clock and wake up at 7, we would say that behavior functions like for rest, right? But if you take a nap at 2 o'clock instead of going to like an important presentation you have to give, it's still the same behavior, but the function of it is different. It's probably avoidance in that context, right? So yes, on the surface, secrets, or like being secret or being private, that behavior can seem the same because it's like you're not sharing information, but what's behind it is different. So with secrets, most times it's about withholding some things I was saying because there's like shame around it, or there's fear of being judged, or like you did something, maybe you acted outside your values and you are withholding, keeping information from somebody, you lied to somebody or something like that.
Yeah.
Privacy, the function of it is boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's like more in the affirmative, like saying, this is something that is for me.
Yeah.
Right. This is something that I'm not, I don't owe information to other people. I mean, I say all the time, like, we live in an era where privacy is extremely undervalued. People think like everything should be said. Every thought that we have should be posted on the internet at all times.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So what do you think about what I'm saying? Does that make more sense or resonate?
Well, my first thought is energy, so I think like energy psychology. So I think like the underlying, so behavior on the outside seems the same, but underlying the energy is very different.
Yes. That's what I mean by like qualitatively different, right?
Yeah. Well, we can measure energy, girl.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
Yeah. I don't know how, but somebody can.
Yeah, I know. That's why I always say one of my former supervisees said one day she's gonna create the Nikki Rubin vibes scale. I'd always say vibes in session. I'm like, we can't measure it yet. I'm sure Western science will figure out how to measure it.
It's interesting. I started by saying about how like the secrets or like omission, commission, and building trust, like say for a team to perform. I mean, there are millions of measurements of performance, like in business and none of trust. If you think
that's so interesting.
Because how do you measure? Like and so it really misses kind of the mark about what makes for the most successful teams and businesses is ones that have this beautiful blend of the two together, both performance and trust. And that's, again, I think this is where secrets and privacy comes in, because one of the things I do with like people, executives I coach, is you have to have a balance of the two. So to your point with boundaries, like you can't be coming to work and just leaving and like having no interaction socially with your team. They have to know you a little enough.
Totally. Yes.
Right? But doing that in a way that's effective and constructive. And I think that's what you said before. You said privacy is effective and secrecy is not. What'd you say?
Yeah. I said for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part. Right. So
I agree.
Well, and actually to that point, like, it's interesting as we're talking that I think privacy also helps cultivate trust.
Yes.
Because it's like, it's somebody who's practicing privacy and not in an extreme way. So just like I gave the example of secrecy could be effective in certain contexts, privacy could be ineffective, right? Somebody could be so extremely private. They're not keeping secrets, but they're just so closed off, right? But for the most part, I would say when somebody practices privacy and doesn't share every single thought in their head, they have boundaries, they have emotional boundaries, it communicates to other people like, I have self-worth.
Yes.
Right. I deserve things for myself, or I deserve space or time. And I mean, again, I'm not going to like eloquently explain this at all right now, but I think that cultivates trust. I certainly like respect that in other people. It makes me maybe because actually maybe it's because I see in other people like, oh, they trust themselves, like they listen to themselves, they know what they need, and that, I don't know, inherently sort of increases my belief in them and my willingness to trust them. I don't know. Speaking?
No, it's beautiful.
Bananas right now. Like,
are you just speaking truthfully?
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, am I just saying cuckoo stuff right now, or does that?
No, it makes me think of Jim Carrey's movie Liar Liar. And that's I often
throwback.
Total throwback. Well,
yeah.
And if anyone's ever seen that or hasn't, it's nobody's that truthful. Like everybody has some level of secrecy or privacy in their life. Because, sometimes like with OCD, people feel guilty that they're like not omitting everything. It's like, you don't have to omit everything. Like the brain is really creative and much of that stuff is just left for you internally. And actually, there's a website called Post Secret. And so I was listening to this podcast called Vanish on 9/11, and this I think it's like 34 or 60 some people disappear every year, like they change their identity. And this podcast follows this young lady that just disappeared on 9/11, but like nothing about her remains were ever found or anything. And she was seen in all like the video footage, like going shopping on 9/10, and so it's really interesting. But that led me to this website that exists. And it used to be, before websites were around, there was like a PO box that you could mail in a postcard with your biggest secrets.
Wow.
So for that podcast, there was one that somebody sent in saying, everyone that knew me before 9/11 thinks I'm dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I
It's,
mean,
yeah.
it was interesting. I mean, it's just like, it's interesting.
Well, but then there's another one not so deep that was like, I'm so lonely that I'm a checkout clerk and I touch people's hand when I give change back because that's intimacy for me.
Oh, that breaks my heart. That's,
Right?
oh, that was, yeah.
But deep, like,
Yeah.
deep, but like
Yeah.
that's, that that's happening in everyday life because everyone's suffering.
Yeah. Well, and so again, like secrets, maybe I could say secrets get in the way of connection,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And privacy doesn't.
Yeah.
Privacy like maintains space for us, right?
Yeah.
And you can have privacy with another person.
Yes.
So if we go back to what you're saying about what we do in our jobs, like
Yes.
yes, it's two of us in the room, right? Like, and
It's private.
legally and ethically, it's private. It's
Yeah.
private. And actually, the privacy creates a space for connection to flourish,
That's
actually,
right.
It creates space. Boundaries create space. That's what privacy is. But yeah, I don't know. It's just funny because actually, I'm going to go back to what you were saying about like basically saying like all the things that are in your head and being overly truthful. We talk a lot about values on this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Pete and I are ACT clinicians, so it's a big
Yeah.
thing in our work. And one thing I always remind people is like human brains can get rigid about anything, like even values, right? Like we can be like, this is the best value or the only value. And so honesty is one of them.
Sure.
And so people get rigidly attached to honesty, which results in, a dorky behavioral term here, rule governed behavior, meaning we have to follow a rule. I always have to say what's true or what's on my mind. And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes it's really effective to practice honesty. Sometimes it's more effective to practice privacy. We don't have to say everything.
That's right.
So I think that's important to remember too, is that you can have values that are different directions. You just can't travel, east and west at the same time, north and south at the same time, right?
Yeah.
You have to choose what's going to be effective based on the context. So, and I guess I'll also say that like honesty and authenticity are different. That's another thing I notice people conflate, right? So just because you're not saying something doesn't mean you're not being authentic. Maybe you're being very authentic by not saying anything.
That's right. Oh, I love that. I love how you, just to break that down behaviorally, I think is really helpful because you can, again, you get to see how it's, internally based and kind of that value-based thing so that it's that energy. It's that Nikki Rubin scale that we're going to be looking for, the vibe scale.
The vibe scale. Yeah, the vibe scale. That's one of my former supervisors she's gonna name it after me, she said.
the vibe scale. Well, Nikki, this is awesome. We have to sign off soon because I got to tell you a secret.
Oh, okay. Well, cool.
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economou.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economou and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.